you're someone who loves to work but struggles to turn off your brain after hours, this video is for you. So not only do you love your work, you love what you do. It's work, but it doesn't really feel like work. But there's still times you wish you could turn your brain off because you'll be playing with your kids and you love them, but you won't really be there because you're not playing Lego, you're working because your mind is busy with it. Or you're out for dinner with your husband and he says to you, "Where are you?" And you realize you've been caught thinking about work again. It's kind of not so cool to be on a date with your hubby and you are not really there. So here's the thing. I know you know this about yourself, but let me tell you, you're driven, you're ambitious, and you've always enjoyed working. And truth be told, at least for me, even the most complex stuff, even the most challenging, even sometimes the most stressful stuff, well, it often felt easier than parenting my two young kids, which was always ironic, but it was the truth because you can control and manage your work, except for the thinking about it all the time part. So if we've not met, my name is Susan. I'm a recovering success chaser and one who still often thinks about work a little more than is helpful. I'm also a master coach, and I'm here for busy, ambitious women who love what they do, but sometimes find it all mentally consuming. So today what I wanted to talk about is, first of all, why it's okay to think about work a lot. And I also want to share some strategies for turning down the volume on work inside your head so that you can be, for example, maybe more present or enjoy other moments in your life that are in addition to work, or maybe not give that work drama any more attention and actually just find ways to disconnect. So let's jump in. Now, first of all, yes, I said that it's okay that you think about work a lot. Here's why. My guess is you really love it, or most of it. And this matters because it's a sense of meaning that you derive, and it can be really energizing. And that's important to know. It's likely you find it really interesting, maybe challenges or problems, solutions you get to innovate for your clients. And probably you care a lot about your work or the people you work with, your clients. And the truth is, it brings in a paycheck that allows you to care in a different way for your family. You maybe have a chance to make a big impact. If it's any or all of those, it's good enough because you've got a drive and a passion for work and it's meaningful, and that matters. First and foremost, I mean, you may know this in your head about yourself, like that this is who you are, but I really want you to take a moment to value and respect that part of you. And I'm going to get into why that's super important in the next point. Two things can be true at once. And you probably know what I mean, but let me give you some examples. For an example, I have two teen boys. I adore them. They are my everything. And there's times when they are incredibly frustrating and vice versa, right? So we can love our family members and they can drive us crazy. Those two things are true at once. I love working out and exercising and how I feel in my body. And sometimes it's the last thing I really want to do. They're both true. I love cheesecake so much, and yet eating it every day would not work, right? So two things can be true. You can love it and you can't have, and so this is what I have learned to call both and, thinking that two things, both of those things, those examples can be true at the same time. So this is actually really important in this context because if two things can be true at the same time, it is actually okay to think about work a lot. And also thing that is true, and there's some really challenging parts to having a busy, active, intelligent mind that never ever stops. So this idea that we have to pit one against the other, or that we're thinking about work a lot, it actually has a place, and there's times we want to be able to stop. I've had moments where I'm like, and currently I'm totally geeking out and getting into this software, and it's so fun, and I just want to spend all my time in it. And there's also this thing called exercise and movement. And I probably should push pause and like go do that too. Right? Not one or the other. They're both good. And so that's just a really practical example of how it can get in the way when it doesn't need to get in the way, and it is in the way, and it's a problem, but it's not. So two things are true. So by giving this issue of I'm always thinking about work, when we allow two things to be true, where your work matters and you think about it more than you always want to, we can start to look at this from some different perspectives without having to judge it or feel guilty about the fact that we're often thinking about things or whatever. And we can appreciate the good and say, this downside part, how am I going to tackle that part? So this part of you that, when I said before, you can start to appreciate and respect and even honor that this is a part of you, and start to get curious about where in your life it's most tricky for you to manage, then we can move into more practical solutions. So for me, it was always with my kids, especially when they were little, not so much now, but playing little person games was excruciating. And my brain would exit, and it was like the last thing I wanted to be doing. It wasn't about my kids. It was about like what we were doing and what I wanted to be doing. And then putting them to bed and reading them a story, like I couldn't stay there because I wanted to be working. I wanted to be thinking about work. And so for me, some of the downsides to this pattern of always thinking about work really interfered with my relationships, especially the ones that matter to me most. I think when my kids were little, maybe they didn't notice it as much, but I certainly noticed it. And I didn't want to be sending messages of me not caring because I couldn't not think about work. Know for yourself where it's problematic and then start there versus this, like, here I go thinking about work again or feeling guilty or badly about it. So that's super, super important. So then I promised you some strategies. So super practically related to the above is when you notice it, strategy number one, when you notice it, can you insert a pause, like a little speed bump of sorts? And my favorite way to do that is to actually like inhale and then exhale and notice the inhale and exhale. And actually, you just have to do it once. That is plenty. And use that little pause, that little speed bump, if you will, to strengthen your awareness of the fact that it's happening. And let that be a way to slow your brain down, just like a speed bump would if you were going down a street. It causes you to slow down. And then you've got choice. It's like, oh, do I kind of accelerate and go fast again? Or do I really want to be doing something else? So super important. Small but mighty, promise you. Okay, my second strategy, one of my all-time favorites, is to do something that gets me into my body. So it also has to be accessible. So if you're really in the thing and your brain is going and going and going, it has to be something that you feel like you could switch into with not a lot of interruption. Because I find that if it's more accessible, and for me, a walk is really accessible, especially outside in nature, I feel like I can still think about the thing, but I'm also walking, right? 2 for 1. So that gets your blood flowing, and it also gets your body involved in the thinking. So you can visualize even blood going into your brain and infusing it. And this strategy will work if you decide to not bring earbuds, like don't be listening to something or bring animals or pets or whatever. The reason is that what we're not trying to do is practice distracting ourselves. That's not the goal here. The goal is to give, almost, at least in this one, give your brain a little bit of a break, if you will. I think of it as a muscle, how tired and engaged it must be always thinking about the things. So getting your body involved can help You feel like you're staying with it, but if you go for a walk, it can actually slow your brain down. So you're not maybe thinking about it as much, or you start to think about it differently because your perspective is shifting. And that will slow your thinking down, and it might even give you some new clarity on it. I find that the longer that I walk, the more it starts to shift, and it can ultimately get to the point where I don't think about things anymore. I'm totally in nature, I'm totally in my body, and it's super cool. But you may not always have time for that. So whatever you can do to just shift and move, your worst case scenario is you get some movement in. If a walk isn't possible, see if you can work with your senses. So what that would have looked like for younger me with littles is to, instead of expecting myself to be able to play wholeheartedly for 8 hours at a time, which somehow my best friend could do very, very, very easily, or so it seemed, is even just to think of it. Again, if we think about our brain as a muscle and wanting to learn to not be in our heads, it's like almost like a little workout. So use your senses in those moments, say 10, 15 minutes, even if 1 minute, doesn't matter. You're practicing a new muscle with your senses. That can look like feeling the texture of the toys, the Lego. It can mean squishing into your kiddos and feeling their bodies, their cheeks, their hair, and letting your senses experience a moment and listen to their giggles. It can mean like when you're out for dinner that you hold on to your glass or your wine glass and allow yourself to feel the glass. Allow yourself to just even sip it slowly and taste the wine, the water. Notice it, notice yourself drinking. Just that small act of practicing coming into your senses can bring you back into this moment. Again, gives the brain a chance to slow down. So there are some strategies that I would offer you. None of them are going to work overnight because our brains are like these overdeveloped muscles that we rely on really, really heavily. And my guess is for most of us, our brains just really actually want a break. They'd be okay with that, but we don't even know what it's like to not be thinking. And so that's part of what we need to practice is what would it be like to not be thinking about it all the time? And for as interesting as that question might be, it might feel a little bit strange to actually find yourself in moments where you're not thinking about work, because in those moments when I started to, it's a bit alarming. I almost felt like I wasn't caring anymore. So that can happen. And we can still practice being in the moments that matter, thinking of our brains as muscles, like those big bodybuilders who are fully developed and strong up on the top half. And as my kids like to remind me, like on the bottom, their legs are like pencils because their emphasis is always on a certain part of their body. So just a little funny visual. Our brains are like that. So remember, to recap as we bring this to a close, is that you want to honor your drive, your passion, how much you care, how much you love your work. No guilt, no shame, nothing. It's just a part of who you are. And it's worth a healthy amount of respect and appreciation because of who you are and what you're able to do and bring into the world. And remember that two things can be true, right? You can be thinking about work all the time, be very driven and ambitious. And sometimes there are these moments you also want to be in and you want to remember, and you don't want to be mentally in your work. So see how many examples and how many places in your life where that can be true is that two things, they don't have to, argue, fight with each other. And lastly, some strategies. Just slow that brain down, insert a pause, and be more in the moments. Insert a pause with your breath. Just like that. Bring your body along with your brain and get the blood flowing and let your brain take a bit of a break while your body moves you. And then finally, practice engaging your senses so that you can step out of active thinking mode. So, my friends, if you found value in this video, I would appreciate if you gave it a like. And if you want to join us on this journey of redefining success and sometimes surviving success, I invite you to hit subscribe. And I will see you next week. Remember, comments, feedback, it's all welcome. Thanks for joining. See you next week.